Welcome to this Arnold Culliford knitwear tutorial on the Crochet Provisional cast-on method. This is the most fantastically versatile cast-on method. It allows you to start working on your stitches and to work in one direction, and then later on you can return to your cast-on edge, which is the edge here in white, and you can remove that waste yarn, that's the white yarn here, and then you end up with a set of live stitches, and you can then choose what to do with them. You can work in the other direction, you can work a cast off, or you can do anything you can do with normal stitches. So the Crochet Provisional cast on is a super handy technique to have up your sleeve. The basic kit that you need in order to work a Crochet Provisional cast on is a crochet hook and some waste yarn. It's helpful if your waste yarn is in a colour that's a good contrast with your main yarn, because it helps you to see what you're doing when you come to pick up the stitches later. And your crochet hook should be roughly the same size as the knitting needles that you're going to be working on. And likewise, it's handy if your waste yarn is roughly the same thickness as your main yarn, but here you'll see that I am actually using a waste yarn that's a little bit thinner than my main yarn, but it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. It just makes things a little easier if it's not dramatically different. To begin with, you need to make a slip knot on your crochet hook. So I'm holding the waste yarn over my fingers with the tail to the front, and then wrapping it round my fingers and making a cross at the front there, so that the yarn attached to the ball goes behind that first wrap. And then going to go under the first wrap and scoop the second one through. Try not to drop it. And then we're tightening it up. And that's now our slip knot on our crochet hook. We're then going to hold the crochet hook over our knitting needle. Keep the tail out of the way. I find it handy to hold that alongside the knitting needle. You're then going to bring the waste yarn under the knitting needle and over the top of the crochet hook. And you're then going to pull that yarn through the slip knot on the crochet hook, and that puts the stitch onto the knitting needle. And you then continue to work that process, so under the knitting needle and over the crochet hook, and pull the loop through, under the knitting needle, over the crochet hook, and pull through. And you're going to continue to do that until you have sufficient stitches. Once you've cast on as many stitches as you need on your knitting needle, you're then going to work a few chains on the crochet hook only, and this will indicate which end of the cast on edge you're going to unravel first when you come to unzip the edge later. And we're going to do this by this time wrapping the yarn only over the crochet hook. It's not going around the knitting needle. And then pull through, so wrap the yarn around and pull the loop through. Do that 4 or 5 times, just long enough that you have a little bit of a tag on one end. One more for luck. And when you've finished and done sufficient stitches, you're just going to snip off the end of your waste yarn. And then that final stitch can just be pulled through, and that secures it off and it won't unravel now. Now that you've got the right number of waste yarn stitches on your knitting needle, you're going to switch to your main yarn, and you're going to work across your stitches however you've been told to do so in the pattern. So here we're just going to knit across the first row in our main yarn. Once you've worked across your first round in the main yarn, or first row in the main yarn, you can now continue in pattern however you're meant to be working. So if you're working in the round, now is the moment when you join to work in the round. You can't do that until you've got your first set of main yarn stitches on your needles. Obviously, if you're working backwards and forwards, you just turn and work the next row as indicated in your pattern. Once you've worked sufficiently in pattern, then it will come a time when you need to unzip your Crochet Provisional cast on edge to reveal your live stitches. So here we are at the edge of the work. The end that just has a tail joined straight in, that's where we began. So we're not worrying about that for the moment. What we're looking for is the end with the little chain stitches. That was our unzipping tab designed to tell us which end to work from. In order to get started, we need to pull this tail back through the stitch at the end of the set of chain stitches. So we've just pulled that end through and we keep pulling it through. And once the end has been unhooked, you should find that you can pull and unravel the chain. If it doesn't immediately become unhooked, then you might need to thread the tail through one more time. So just keep unpicking that end until you reach a point where you can pull on it and it unravels. So I'm going to show you my preferred way of picking up the stitches as we reveal them. So you've got the hanging tail of your main yarn here. We're just going to keep a pinch on that. That tail isn't actually a stitch, so we don't need to worry about it. And we're now going to just keep unraveling until we've got a loop of the waste yarn sitting over the first main yarn stitch. So that navy blue is the first main yarn stitch, and here's the white waste yarn above. Now you can just merrily keep pulling on the tail, reveal the stitches and pick them all up, but I know that some people worry a little bit that they're going to drop a stitch if that happens, or something will unravel. It's quite unlikely in a sticky woolly yarn like this Lopi, but I'm going to show you the way that I like doing this anyway, because it ensures there's no chance of that happening. So you're going to take your knitting needle, and I would suggest that it's a good size or two smaller than whatever needle you used to knit the fabric. And you're going to insert it from top to bottom into that main yarn loop where the waste yarn is coming through it. So there's our waste yarn, and at the base of it there's the first main yarn loop. This one here is just our tail that I'm keeping a hold of, keeping it out the way. So moving along, the next main yarn loop is here. So we're going to put the needle in top to bottom through that, and now if we carefully pull on our waste yarn thread, we should be able to unravel that and release the stitch, and the stitch is safely on the needles with no chance of dropping it. And we can now continue that process. So top to bottom, put the needle through that stitch where the waste yarn's still going through it, and then pull on the waste yarn and it will release the stitch. Here we've come to the end of the round, so there's a stitch, unravel out of it. And now you'll see that my yarn is kind of caught here in what is the first stitch of the next round, so I'm going to pick that one. Pick that one up as well. If you haven't got a final stitch in the round like that, and when you count your stitches you discover that you're short of one, then it is quite straightforward at that join between beginning and end to just pick up a loop from the row below, and you'll be able to make sure that you've got the right number of stitches in that way. And here we are. All the stitches from our cast on edge are now safely picked up on our needles, ready for us to do whatever we'd like with them. I hope you found that helpful to see how to create a Crochet Provisional cast on edge, as well as how to unzip it and pick up your live stitches ready to work in a different direction, or cast off, or join them together, whichever it is that you need to do. We're able to keep our video tutorials free from adverts thanks to the support of our customers over in our online shop. You can click the link up top here in order to visit our online shop, where you'll find books and yarns relating to techniques and all sorts of other things to help you in your knitting. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking the button in the bottom corner here. Thanks ever so much for watching. Bye-bye.